The Wild Robot. Now, this is a movie that's been on my radar for quite a while, and honestly, I began to start hearing a lot of good things about it. The teaser initially came out and blew me away, and although I did stay away from the second trailer, I was eagerly hyped, even though I did hear that there were going to be speaking roles. But the movie got insane reviews from critics, so walking into this, I was like, okay, we'll see how this turns out. And after getting out of the movie,
Oh my god. I get it.
like, The Wild Robot was good. Like, really good. And in terms of just the animated scheme with Dreamworks right now, it definitely is going to end up being an instant classic, and already is one of their best movies ever. And also, in the grand scheme of 2024, with animated films, with the exception of Inside Out 2 and Transformers 1, a lot of these animated films have really not been turning out that amazing. Most of them have either turned out mid or just straight up terrible. And thankfully, in this movie's case, it didn't fall into that category. The Wild Robot exceeded a lot of my expectations. First of all, the movie just looked stunning, and you could tell easily that people from Puss in Boots: The Last Wish had worked on this. The same cinematographer from that movie worked on here. It's such a basically almost paintbrush style that really blends it all together. One thing that I was just sitting through the entire movie with is the visual style of this movie. I was really sitting to myself, is this a DreamWorks movie? It was just the scale of the scenes. It was really, really well done. And it just didn't feel like a DreamWorks movie, nor did it even feel like a Pixar movie. It felt like a Studio Ghibli movie, almost. And actually, a lot of inspiration from those movies was taken here, and it really does show. And another thing I was a little bit off about that I'm not sure I was gonna, if it was gonna uplift the movie or bring it down, was the characters having voices. Now, I previously have not read the books, and honestly, a lot of people can say that. A lot of people going into this movie probably have heard of the book, but never read it themselves. And from the teaser, made it seem like the animals weren't going to be speaking, but here they are. And actually coming out of this movie, I'm actually really happy that they did speak. Yes, without them speaking would have been a completely different movie. It would have fallen into almost WALL-E territory. But with them speaking, we really got to know each character, and every single character really stood out on their own, and actually were very memorable. And the entire voice cast did an amazing job. And not only that, these actors really didn't push upon their voices, just, forcing it. Oh yeah, I already know that voice. Oh, it's not one of those it's not like a major celebrity cast. You got some big names in there, like Pedro Pascal, Lupita Nyong'o, and Mark Hamill, but the thing is, these characters aren't being, these voices aren't like, it's not like a Chris Pratt situation. They really pour a lot of soul into their roles, and it really does show. One character I really did like was the Fox character in this movie, also played by Pedro Pascal. Another role where he's technically still taking care of an orphan. And I actually really did like his character. Yes, he did have that attitude that kinda does fall into the typical Fox animated character that you have, but he sets himself apart from the other ones, because some would either end up being the same, but one thing that will end up being the same, unfortunately, is that whether you like it or not, he will probably still fall into the deepest pits of hell of DeviantArt. And one thing I really found surprising, and I haven't felt this in a very long time with an animated movie, there was not a single character I genuinely disliked. And that is really crazy to say, because there's always, with an animated movie, or hell, just with a movie in general, there's always that character you mildly dislike or may even hate, but there's always that one character, whether it's a forced comedic character or a character that just doesn't work. But with this movie, everything worked. There was not a single character I disliked, and that's a really great feat on its own. And secondly, the score. Oh my god. The score of this movie also just does not feel like your typical Dreamworks movie. It has that feel where it gets to fully tell its story, almost, and there's nothing really intervened. There's no popular song that's forcibly put in there. I mean, yes, there's songs in there from popular artists, but it's not like taking you out of the movie not feeling put in there. It really takes itself at a really nicely paced runtime. Like, actually, this is relatively long for a movie at this scale, and DreamWorks usually falls into the 1 hour, 30-minute territory, and they really like to stay there for some reason. But they let this movie flesh out with its story really well, and it's a journey. One thing people are going to get out of this movie is its journey. And once you get to the end of the movie, it's so satisfying to see these characters grow and see where you start from. On rewatch on this movie, it may even get better. I know I'm gonna rewatch this movie eventually, but I know on second rewatch, I'm probably gonna love this movie even more. One thing you'll obviously definitely notice in this movie is Roz's voice starting to change. It sounds so robotic, you know, the typical robot voice you have in the beginning, and then as the movie progresses, it becomes a lot different and more fluent and feels like an actual character. But the way she is also does affect the other characters. You have Bright Bill, the Gosling that Roz raises in the movie. As he gets older, he introduces people in a kind of robotic voice, how Roz usually normally talks. And it kind of almost has an autism metaphor. Not directly, but you can kind of get a feeling for it. And it differentiates how this Gosling is different from the rest of the other Goslings because, well, he was raised by a robot. And another thing I'll add is it's really, really interesting humor with this movie. One thing I'll get off is that from the beginning, it is kind of dark. This movie does not hold back from how insane the wild can be, and it's not a pretty place up front. There are really a lot of jokes about death within the wild, some practically kinda on screen. There was a scene of our bird's head being plopped off immediately, and I was like, wow, they snuck that in? And there were clearly scenes of death occurring in the movie. And one thing, which isn't a pretty important plot point if you don't want to be spoiled, just skip to this point. Roz is the one that killed Bright Bill's parents, and it's something that's you would expect when you initially find out about this. Oh, they're gonna save this for the third act breakup. No, not actually. This reveal actually happens a lot earlier than I thought it was going to happen. And it does kind of set that drift apart, but it's not at the end of the movie. It's actually pretty in the middle. And that is something actually different that I wasn't expecting. And again, the movie is paced really well through Roz's journey. And, you know, positives all in all, the characters, the score, the animation, I don't really have that crazy of negatives. I will say the villain itself in the movie probably didn't get the fleshing out it needed, but it was okay and passable for, you know, what the character was, and it was still an AI, so, you know, there's not that much fleshing out to do, but it felt a little rushed in that aspect. Like, also one thing I noticed is that the movie practically almost ended like 3 times. Like, you were waiting for, okay, this is gonna be the conclusion. Oh, we're still going? Oh, okay, this will be the conclusion. And then we finally do get to the ending. It's not that big of a problem. It's just the ending feels like it would have ended maybe like 10 more minutes ago. But then again, the movie does feel like that its climax could have been drawn out maybe like another 15 minutes. But, you know, it's nothing crazy. The movie still ends really, really nicely. And I am so sorry if you watched the Wild Robot trailer too. My instincts were telling me not to watch it, and I was so right. Oh my god, DreamWorks really needs to stop doing this. But they give away so much in the second trailer. Now, this shouldn't discourage you from seeing the movie. This journey that you go on with this movie will touch you, and the emotional beats will still just as hard. But, oh my god, they really need to stop doing that. But we've gotten to the modern age where a trailer needs to show out all the stops to get butts in seats, because it's really hard to do that nowadays. If you really want a family to go out and see a movie, which is relatively really expensive nowadays, you really have to show out everything. And I guess Dreamworks said, okay, we gotta show the craziest scenes in here to get butts in seats, which, actually worked. Honestly, the teaser alone sold me on the movie, and I can probably say that for a lot of people. They really didn't need to see the second trailer. But the movie's doing really well. It opened at $35 million. Now, in terms of just animated movies, for a sequel, that would be a little worrying, but this is still a relatively high opening weekend. Reason being, this is one of the highest opening weekends for a non-sequel, non-ginormous adaptation that everybody knows about, because you're gonna have that actually people in the comments saying The Wild Robot is based off of a book, but I don't think everyone walking into this knew it was a book. You have that some really small percentage. The Dogman is a different story. That's a pretty big IP that everybody knows about. And this just goes to show people will give original movies a chance if they're good. And also, if the trailer does it justice, which I'm still a little disappointed about with the Transformers one. I really do kind of feel bad for that movie. The Wild Robot is going to have legs in October. To be fair, we got movie after movie with every week. We literally have Joker, then Piece by Piece, then Venom, and it keeps going. And then you have a plethora of horror movies. The Wild Robot will still have legs. It'll probably most likely be the big family movie to see this fall before Moana 2 comes around. And that's a W for Dreamworks. Dreamworks never lost its touch. Everybody's saying Dreamworks is dead. Oh my god, Dreamworks is falling apart again. The thing is with Dreamworks is known to have inconsistencies. You can have Shark Tale, and then you can have How to Train Your Dragon. You can have The Boss Baby and Trolls, and then you can have Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. And ever since then, we went from, Ruby Gillman, Trolls Band Together, and Kung Fu Panda 4, which all films weren't necessarily terrible. They were just okay. But I will say that Dreamworks is actually in a really interesting spot right now, because before we thought this was the last in-house film. Now there's people saying Dogman is the last in-house film. But going forward, I really hope Dreamworks at its core stays the same. Obviously, don't make bad movies, but obviously have a good core with a balance of things. Next year, all the Dreamworks movies coming out are just straight book adaptations, and one show adaptation. You have Dogman, you have The Bad Guys 2, and interestingly, Gabby's Dollhouse, which I haven't talked about, but eventually I will. Not now, but probably later on in the year, because that's a really interesting movie that Dreamworks is giving a theatrical release. But those are my thoughts on The Wild Robot. What did you think of the movie? I personally thought it was amazing, and you should definitely go check it out if you haven't. Let me know down in the comments, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Dreamworks is still peak, and it never died.